Tashdile and welcome to In Conversation with Tibet TV. This is Sakina Bhatt. Today I have with me a guest who is an academic, advocate, author, analyst and activist based in Hawaii. He is a human rights advocate engaging in global and regional mechanisms guaranteeing fundamental freedoms. He is active in the development and the climatic change advocacy. He is Joshua Cooper. Welcome to the show, Joshua. It's nice to have you here with us.
Tashidele, aloha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Joshua, so tell us what brings you to Dharamshala, the exile home to His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
I'm very fortunate that I was invited with a delegation of Swiss lawyers and activists to come and share some of the potential processes that people of Tibet can focus on regarding human rights and climate change. So I'm here for a 3-day training and also fortunate enough to have meetings with the Parliament in exile as well as the different branches of the government here.
So you had an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So tell us more about the audience and how was your experience like meeting the Tibetan spiritual leader?
Yes, I met him fortunately in Hawaii before, so it was great to be able to see him again. And it was perfect because when I landed, it was one of the clearest days, so you could see all the mountains. And then they took me directly from the flight to meet with him.
Directly?
Yes, so I hope I didn't look too fresh after 2 days of traveling. But it was wonderful to share with him the struggles of what's happening in Hawaii, but also share with him some of the potential strategies we were thinking that we could bring for bold advocacy regarding Tibet, and also just sharing the message from the people of Hawaii who really appreciate his message of peace and what we call aloha. So I just wanted to tell him thank you and to return the favor.
So Joshua, tell us, what is your association with the Tibet cause?
I was fortunate enough to be able to be involved with Tibet since I was a student. I was on the board of directors of Students for a Free Tibet, and that's where I began trying to think of new strategies to do the direct action, of course, with Ruckus Society and all the work that we do to raise awareness, but also then to use the diplomatic route to be able to make sure that Tibet cause was in the halls of the United Nations around the world.
So how does your family feel about your support for Tibet and the Tibetan people?
The great thing is my mom's name is Hope, so I stayed for her birthday, so I'm like the seed of hope. So she knows, and she's always raised me, as well as growing up in Hawaii. We really do have a sense of compassion and love in Hawaii, and we really feel, even though Hawaii is in the ocean and Tibet is in the Himalayas, that we're really the same one people. And we also know that if the freedom of the Tibetan people is not allowed to be exercised, then really none of us are free. So it's that sense of solidarity with one another, and so Mom supports it, and all my students that I share the stories with are also very excited to know more. So the truth is, I think the world is hungry for human rights. And so the whole point is just to spread that aloha around the world.
What inspires you to champion the cause of Tibet?
The people. I've always fortunate to have many Tibetan friends around the world that I've met and serving together on the board of directors. Also, we did so many direct actions together in the late 90s and 2000s to make sure that the world understood what was truly happening in Tibet.
So Joshua, you have been in Tibet in 2009. So tell us about your experience and what did you observe while you were there?
It was an homage to that sacred land. We figured out a way to be able to get in. And I also had great friends from Students for a Free Tibet, so they told me where to go. And I came with a whole bunch of indigenous friends from around the world. And when they met the Tibetan people in the places they told us to go, they were just who they always are. That sense of love for humanity, that happiness, the humor. And we were in places where it's just Tibetan people. It's also sad in a way, though. The militarization is so extensive. And then also the show of police force and military everywhere. But on the other hand, there's also so much nature. So we'd make our way to Potala Palace and then also be able to go out in nature just to be there. And the sky is as blue as Hawaii. So in a way, you're there under the same sky, but a whole different place up at that level. So it was amazing to be able to go there for that week. But then on the other side, it's sad when you realize it would be a much more beautiful place if it wasn't commodified with the settlers coming in and changing the original origins of that place. Especially when you go to international arena and people say, you don't know, how would you know what's going on, da, da, and I can say, actually, I know because I saw it with my own eyes. Whereas most people, unfortunately, just have to get it from a book. So I think, in a way, it only strengthened my resolve to make sure that I work on this for my entire life. So I'm very glad that I did go.
So you have been involved in raising the human rights issues of Tibet in the UN, particularly with the human rights committees that are dealing with the human rights issues, such as racial discrimination. So can you tell us about the kinds of reports that you work on and how does it work and the challenges that you have faced?
So the exciting thing is there's 9 different human rights treaty bodies. So I've been able to help whenever there would be a review of China. I would always partner with different Tibetan associations and open myself to be able to get all the information. And what we would do is we'd do 5 stages. There's preparation. In the preparation phase, we try to explain the human rights process, what it is, what it isn't, and what we can achieve. And then the second is the interaction. And that's where I think I'm most effective, in that I understand the UN mechanisms. I also know many of the experts. So what you're doing is trying to match. And in that case, what's the cause that the people are bringing from Tibet, and which experts care the most about it? Because those experts also have a job. Their job is to make sure this treaty is enforced. So you have to match the two up. So I organize that. And then in phase 3, the consideration, if you've done your job, those experts represent you well and put pressure on the government. So the government will give a line, but that expert, if you've trained and talked to them, they will be able to do follow-up. And most importantly, at the end, we got this great statement by one of the other experts that we talked to from another country. And he said, it's sad that you missed such an opportunity to really have an exchange and learn so you can improve on racial discrimination in your country. It was such a harsh word because the government thought they'd done so good. But this expert said, no, we could see right through what you're saying. And unfortunately, you wouldn't even listen to the real points we were making. So it was great that we were able to convince them what the important issues are. But what's also important is in the interaction and in the consideration, you give the questions they should suggest, but also the recommendations. And those recommendations, then, it's important because for the most part, we always can share what's wrong in the world. If I ask you what's wrong, easy, boom. But what do we want? So we really focus on what's the recommendations to realize human rights. And then they adopt the report, and we look at the report, it very much reflected the views and values and the vision we had for the process. And now it's implementation. And of course, that's the important 5th stage, that we try to implement those recommendations and use the UN and the language as a leverage to put pressure, moral pressure, political pressure, to make sure that the situation changes.
So how do you see the Tibetan freedom struggle, and where do you see it headed in future?
I think what's very important is we live in difficult times. We have it where more authoritarian regimes are countering compassion. More authoritarian regimes are being repressive to their people. So what's also important, though, is I see people all around the planet coming together in solidarity. So even though there's more horrible governments right now, I see people more committed, and I believe it's possible. So what's really important is for Tibet to connect on the common issues that everyone else is also focusing on. And people always want to be able to practice their religion. That's one of the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship. And the other 2 are freedom from fear and freedom from want. So we all just want that in the world. So it's making sure that Tibet is included in the human family. And even though China has tried to make them invisible, I think what we've been able to show is the invincibility of the Tibetan people.
You can see that there are lots of environmental destructions and human rights violations in Tibet. So you, being an academic activist and an advocate, do you see this as an issue just for Tibet and the Tibetan people, or do you see it as a global issue?
It's a global issue. And I think what we have to do is also, when we're looking at these issues, always go to the source. So a good example is I also help indigenous peoples, the Khmer Krom, from Vietnam. They're in the Mekong Delta. And they also practice Theravada Buddhism as well. So you're at the top and they're at the bottom. But through that entire process, there's too many dams, there's too much pollution. So by the time the water gets to them, they're impacted and their health deteriorates. So I think this example of Khmer Krom people and Tibet shows that we're all one people. And we have to make more connections. The more connections we make, the more we care for one another. There's also the Lao people that I help. I help Alliance for Democracy in Laos. And they face a repressive communist government as well. So when you see that, everyone's all common on this river of life. And in a way, my role is, I can't paddle for everyone. Everyone has to do their own work, but I can steer the canoe to make sure we go in the right direction. And I hopefully have seen the river well enough that I know where to go. But we're all in this together. And so it's really a partnership for peace, and it's coming together that way.
So Joshua, right now you're having this conference workshop. So what do you see the outcome of this workshop, and what is the accomplishment of this?
The exciting thing is we're able to hear directly from the Tibetan people who are organizing from civil society, but also from the government in exile. So one, we're creating a partnership between the people and the government. But two, it's really a chance for me to learn firsthand what are the issues, and then also make those connections so that when another review comes up, such as the Universal Periodic Review, or even the next Conference of Parties on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, we'll be able to make sure that the Himalaya issue is there at the global level regarding climate change. And the other aspect is growing awareness, but also generating advocacy so more people know about the Tibetan cause.
Okay, Joshua, what is your opinion on the global awareness on Tibet's climatic and environmental issues, and what measures should be taken by the Tibetans in exile to bring this to the wider global audience?
I think what we have to do is be strategic. Many people are seeing the same situation happening with natural disasters, more frequent and more intense. And so people would understand when Tibet talks about what they're facing, but to also realize we're in it together. So the important thing, one, is to share so they understand what climate change is, but more importantly, how we all need to take action together. We have to do adaptation, we have to do mitigation, and on a daily basis, how we practice and how we live will save the planet. Too many things in the world are seen just through the fiscal perspective. They're only focusing on finance. And that framework leaves so much to be desired. And what I think is important is Tibet brings that lens of love. And that's how we have to see the world, because we're so interconnected, but we also are interdependent. And only when the people of Tibet have their freedom, will all people have their freedom and be able to reach their full potential. So protecting Tibet is also protecting part of the planet, and we can't allow just one part of the world to be polluted and destroyed in the pursuit of profit, while the rest of the planet is in peril as well.
So Joshua, finally, what is your piece of advice to the young Tibetans, both in and outside Tibet?
The exciting thing is I've always been working with Tibetan youth when I was a youth as well, and now getting a little bit more into the later realm. The exciting thing is you really have to pursue what you love. And so whatever your interests are, if you love music, write songs that educate people. No one's going to always want to hear a lecture by a teacher. So if you're a great musician, make songs. If you're a filmmaker, we had such a digital media now, no one really reads as much. Make amazing movies that inspire people. So I would say, find out what your calling is, listen to your heart, see what you really want to pursue, and then you'll be the best at it in the world. You're never going to have to worry about what job you'll have or certain questions, because if you're doing what you love, it'll show, and you'll also be the best at what you do. And the world needs inspiration right now. And I think Tibetans have always provided that, and we can always do more together.
Okay, Joshua, thank you so much for coming to the show. I had a very good time doing this conversation with you.
It's a pleasure meeting you as well. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next episode of In Conversation with Tibet TV.